Welcome to the DNA of Things, where we uncover how DNA, environment, and behavior intersect to unlock human potential. And this podcast explores transformative stories and groundbreaking science that highlight the profound ways we can optimize our lives and the world around us. And of course, a critical component of what we do is their storytelling around these conscious creators that have been so blessed to host on the DNA of Things. And so among them is John Paul, or JP O'Brien, the founder of Black Lab X, an innovative venture studio in Boulder, Colorado. And he's also the CEO of Biosciences, with a mission to unlock human potential and impact 1 billion lives by 2030. JP has revolutionized personalized health strategies by combining advanced genetics, biomarkers, and technology. His career spans groundbreaking tech startups and a deeply personal journey into the health and purpose-driven entrepreneurship. Today, we cover the extraordinary journey of JP O'Brien. We explore his transition from software innovation to human potential, sparked by a life-changing health challenge. We'll discover how JP uses cutting-edge technologies like genomics and AI to transform personalized healthcare, creating tools that empower individuals to live more optimized, purpose-driven lives. We also delve into the unique ecosystem of Black Lab X, a hub for innovation, creativity, and human performance. From navigating existential questions to exploring AI's role in reshaping the future, this episode offers insights that inspire and challenge us to reimagine what's possible. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome John Paul O'Brien, JP, the founder of Black Lab X, an innovative venture studio in Boulder, Colorado, with a bold moonshot goal to unlock human potential and create scalable health solutions that impact 1 billion lives by 2030. As the CEO of Biosciences, he leverages cutting-edge genetics, biomarkers, and evidence-based insights to deliver personalized health strategies that empower individuals to optimize their well-being. JP's journey is deeply personal, inspired by overcoming his own health challenges and recognizing the transformative power of technology and self-knowledge. This mission drives his work with Black Lab X, where he has built a unique ecosystem that includes a human performance lab, a media innovation hub, and wellness solutions designed to optimize mind, body, and spirit through strategic partnerships with organizations like the Department of Defense, world-class hospitals. John Paul integrates advanced technologies with systems thinking to tackle some of the most pressing challenges in health and human performance. His work is bridging gaps between innovation and impact, ensuring that every breakthrough serves a greater purpose. And so, guided by this passion for enabling healthier, higher performing lives, JP envisions a future where technology and human potential unite to redefine what is possible for individuals and communities worldwide. JP, I hope I didn't make you feel too uncomfortable with that glowing bio overview. But since we started chatting a few months ago, and I've been able to do some recon on some of the great work you've been doing, I just had to let our listeners know everything that's been going on. So let me just say welcome to the show.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
One of the things you said to me in one of our previous conversations, and I'm paraphrasing here, is you got to a point in your career, you've got a success insofar as the software world. I believe you're a software engineer in a previous life. Is that about accurate? Yeah. And you had some success. Sorry.
No. Just to add to that, it's interesting. We were talking about this just before. I kind of went through school during this most pivotal time, right? Which is the browser just showed up from the internet. And that really went in my direction to say, hey, let's go after software. Let's go after the internet. Let's go after SaaS. Let's go after these capabilities that were never available before. So that's where I really, my first iteration out of school was going after that side of it, distributed computing.
Yeah. Well, and now you're onto this human potential, extending human capability push. And I remember, something that you had said, you'd had this success in the software space, and now you had a moment of pause, where you really kind of took a moment with yourself and, thought deeply about, what do you want to do? And actually your answer reminded me of what Viktor Frankl wrote about in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, right? He did, created this whole discipline of psychotherapy, and it was really about helping people find meaning and purpose. And he talks about his meaning and purpose is helping people find meaning and purpose, right? And, I heard you describe your vision as much as, you want to touch 1 billion lives by 2030. It was kind of the nature in which you have thought about going after that really kind of compelled me to, have this conversation with you, because it seems to me you're really about, empowering the hearts and the minds and the spirits of this generation. And so what was the aha moment that took you to that? Because I'm sure it isn't something that just happens overnight.
Yeah, it was. And by the way, I'm not alone. Like I did a bunch of startups, software startups, investment bank and whatnot. And it was 12 years ago when kind of life gave me that pause. And it really just demanded me of a simple question, like, what's your purpose in life? And I had read Viktor Frankl's book earlier, but then I picked it up again, and it shocked me. Right? It's like, really, we should be doing it. Like, why aren't the people who are creating these companies focused on the most important things? Right? And what would you live and die for was basically the question. Right? Like Viktor Frankl did. Like, what impact can you really make? And so for me, when I went down that path, my purpose is to unleash the greatness of people around me. And I said, okay, well, what business can I build with that? I mean, what people can I attract? Ultimately start with purpose, then people, and then the business side. And that's where Black Lab started, really, was that through that inspiration.
Amazing. I just finished a book. I'm sure you've heard of it if you haven't read it. A friend of mine from my Red Bull partnership days, Brandon Larson, recommended it to me. It's called Thinking in Systems. I'm just trying to pull the the author here. Yeah, with Donella Meadows, Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. And yeah, Brandon, he so I met him in my previous days when I was focused on, performance DNA and helping athletes like Olympians, X Factor athletes, pro athletes, unlock their DNA. And, we had, some really interesting conversations at Red Bull, like a lot of their X Factor, camps and very experiential, but also very data driven. And anyway, Brandon and I always stayed in touch. He's now at NASA, I believe, like helping astronauts blast off, but also return safely. Very, very much like an engineering mind, but he's focused in the realm of human performance. So he said, Jeremy, you read this book because you already think this way, but this is going to, put words to a lot of things that I think you feel. And, one of the things that really resonated with me is like really towards the end of the book is, you can look at the system in terms of, inputs, outputs, stocks and flows, et cetera. And you can always kind of optimize it for whatever you want. But how often do we think of that thing that we actually want? Like, is it top line or, is it colonizing Mars, right? Is it, GDP or is it the most educated country? So really exciting to, hear a mission like yours going on in Colorado. So, walk me through that. So I'd love to hear more about, the man in terms of like the twists and turns that got you there. Cause you were a Cornell undergrad. Is that right?
Yep. Aerospace.
Yeah.
Cornell undergrad.
Aerospace, right? What year were you there? Probably a little before me.
Graduated in 95.
95. Okay. I didn't make it there until 2008. And I was there more for postdoctoral research, right. But Ithaca, man, 10 square miles surrounded by reality. Wow. That was quite a trip. So yeah, tell me how you came out of Ithaca, and I'd love to learn more about what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, maybe when I look back and take inventory of like my experiences, I think we're all, made, not born. We're grown through our environment. In my environment, I got to start. I don't get to pick who my parents. None of us get to pick who our parents are or where we were born. But I was born in Paris. A couple of Americans that were traveling for IBM. My dad was working there. And so I got born into this very cross-cultural kind of feeling and very different points of views and all sorts of different types of politics. Came to the US, went back to France, came to the US. And then when I went into college, same thing. I played 2 sports, football and lacrosse up there to start. Realized I wasn't going to play on Sundays. and ended up joining a car team. So we actually built race cars. And at the time, it was electric race cars. So you can imagine in like 93 and 94, when it didn't even exist yet, we were building electric race cars, which was a lot of fun.
Wow.
And the same thing, we had this team of very cross-disciplinary, about 60 people working on the team together. And I was the lead on it, but it was about bringing all these people together, right? All these different points of views. And those things were, when I look back, those experiences were fundamental to the way I think today. And really trying to bring people from lots of different areas. And so today, whether it's artists or entrepreneurs or athletes or investors or marketers or, investment bankers, right? Like these people all see the world very, very differently. Their worldview and their values can be very different. But ultimately, when we break down the problem set, people really care about similar things, right? They care about health and love and relationships and success and these pieces. But we just sometimes don't agree on how to get there. So that's been basically my background. Is all the companies I've started have been around helping other companies or people when I look back at it. And the thing that I realized also about a decade ago, before when I just started Black Lab, was that there's a lot of guys just like you and me. There's a lot of people out there that they just have never been given permission to really say, wait a minute, just work on what matters and find out what that means for you. I have this conversation with my poor kids, right? They hear this, of course, dad's big on it, but they really embraced it now. And that's the conversation we have at the Thanksgiving dinner table, right? Like, hey, what's the most important thing to work on? So I think, to me, when I look back, and maybe what I'm feeling today is I just want to ring the drum, right? I just want to be like, hey guys, for all of you guys out there and gals that have the ability to take some risk and don't have to make a paycheck literally tomorrow, take a second to sit back and be like, hey, if I could do anything, what would I do? And whether that's because you have all the money in the world or no money in the world, and either way, it doesn't matter. Like, what would you really do? And so that's kind of where I'm feeling the most call.
Very cool. Well, we talked about just ahead of this call where, the technology of the day was browser technology, access to the internet. What has really, captured your imagination today? If you look back and, from that perspective, could have been some that, innovation that you saw in the last decade, or, what we're seeing today. Really would love to get your perspective and what's really lighting you up.
Yeah. So back in the late 90s, I co-founded my first company. It's called Learning Productions. I was the CTO, technology founder. And we built this massive system on the internet that ended up have a big AI inference engine in the back end. Remember, AI, couldn't even spell AI back then. And what we built was basically job simulators. So we basically had all the people from E-Trade basically go through the hardest phone calls, every month. And it was on a simulated kind of, just like a pilot would do in a flight simulator. These were like job simulators. And what was obvious then was that this technology was allowing us to do something that people had never been able to do before. Like, you could read a pamphlet, you could watch a video, but could you really gain experience in a simulated environment? And we couldn't have done that before. And all of a sudden we were able to do it. So I always look at these step changes, like we call it deep tech, but it's areas where innovation or technology or science has shown up where we can now do things that we've never been able to do before. So if I fast forward to today, what's got me most excited is these stacking exponential technologies. I mean, you talk about genomics and all of your work in it. Like, what was it, 30 years ago, it was more than $1 billion to do a whole genome sequence, right? And then 20 years ago, $10 million. 10 years ago was $1 million. And today it's less than 1,000. And that's incredible.
Yeah.
And so the ability to do that. So now all of a sudden what happens? We have a whole genome sequence. It's a lot of data. Well, now it's enabling all this science and all this discovery. It's allowing for us to then use things like AI and ML and, large language models to basically then take that, interpret it, come back and give tremendous support to individuals, democratizing that support potentially. And I'm starting to see this stacking where, like, it's happening faster. And, I'm not the only one saying this, but it's happening faster than I think we can even imagine. And that's what's so exciting about today.
Yeah. I think it's worthwhile chatting a little bit about, the genomics revolution that you just described, because, not only are those, wet lab technologies just ridiculously reduced in their cost, but it's the tools that we have to analyze now. And then the other thing too is like you don't have to be a master in genomics or bioinformatics anymore with all these softwares, or just even leveraging the ability to create software. So like I think about, my PhD, for example, the time I spent on analysis, say it was really in the last kind of 2 years. The first phase was kind of like ideation, data collection. Then your last like year and a half is like analyzing it, putting it all back together. That period of time that took me, say, around 18 months, I'm confident I probably could have done it in maybe 18 days is a stretch, but a heck of a lot faster because of course I'm on the other side and I know what question I was really asking, having gone through that whole kind of heavy lifting. But now knowing what I know, the tools, you can build them so much faster, you can repurpose others. It's just absolutely incredible. And then genomics becoming ubiquitous, right? And then so what I mean by is accessed, interdisciplinary by multiple groups, by different subject matter experts. Because I mean, the way that I've thought about DNA for the longest time is, we learn in our like kind of conventional academia about disease genes. Well, why? Because they're associated with this thing that popped up in our lifetime that we call a disease, right? But I've always kind of shied away from disease genes, like as if this gene was an effector for a specific disease. Now, of course, there are kind of rare instances of things like Parkinson's disease, but I'm thinking more like chronic disease, because there really is this epistatic effect, and essentially this whole concert of interaction that's going on in response to an environment and in response to behaviors. And so when I had done the work previously with, some of our high performance partners, what I was always really interested in is, finding, genes associated with, extremes, like extreme ability to, recover, extreme ability to, kind of outlast or have resilience under a specific strategic stress, hopefully. And those things avail themselves as these kind of latent capabilities because we don't even know we have them until we put the system under stress, right? And then we learn, okay, actually there are differences genetically. And so if I'm not blessed with that genetic capability, there are actually ways for me to leverage my environment and my behavior. And so that, lends itself to the kind of two extremes that I've become familiar with. And that is, the extreme athlete populations, which would include, I think, your astronauts and your DOD, your military, et cetera, like people really on the edge. And then there's like the rare disease as well, because, these are folks that at either end, they are living in like life or death scenarios, and they're just super motivated to understand themselves more deeply for the sake of their, survival, like literally life or death with rare disease. But, in the human performance realm, like sometimes that solution means life or death, or execution means life or death. So it's really interesting that different parties are now getting involved and able to ask, kind of off the wall questions like, hey, is there such a thing as like a super sleeper, like somebody who can recover in 4 hours? And if so, like, what do you do in your environment to recreate that natural capability? Or, if Elon Musk has a crew he's sending to Mars, is like, well, what is the ideal population that we need to look at to ensure success of that kind of first ideation of colonization? So it's just the fact that genomics is so much more available to all these different disciplines is just so exciting right now. And you're probably seeing this obviously to some extent with Biosciences, correct?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, one of the things that I agree with your kind of need thing, right? Which is this like life or death situation. What we're seeing is a lot of people my age, 40s, 50s, 60s, their need is like, I'm no longer as young as I was, and I don't feel the same. And
Mm-hmm.
and it's gone from not just a want, but to a need. Like, I need to be able to run with my grandkid. I need to be able to like get up and not feel like crap. I need to, and the crazy thing about that is that we're not looking at genes that are like, elite recovery. We're looking at things like APOE status, right? Like, what should you be putting in your body? When should you go to sleep? What is the best recovery? What's the best exercise for you? And it doesn't mean you're going to go be some elite athlete, but all of a sudden, these are such low hanging fruits and making so much impact. I think that's really where we're going to see I mean, it always starts. This is the way we think about it too. It always starts with the elite, right? Because they have their need is on there. But to be able to democratize that down to everybody, I mean, that's where the excitement is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just a real world application, like a family application as well. So like I looked at, my status for the MTHFR gene, for example. So I looked at my status, my wife's status, our carrier status, for example. And so I had, both functioning copies of the gene. My wife had one functioning copy and one suboptimally functioning copy. So, important for methylation, particularly important, for production of B vitamins. And, if you have a lower functioning MTHFR gene, you start to see things manifest like, increased stress, mental health, more inflammation, et cetera. But it was interesting to even kind of look through the family lens to see that, okay, actually my copies are normal, but as it turns out, again, my wife has one of each and then our daughter has one of each. So just even in our household, we have this, kind of difference in the precision nutrient requirements. And, in another lifetime, people might say, oh, well, the girls are being crazy. It's like, no, there is a genetic difference. It's not the X chromosome. It's, specifically this genetic marker, and we can actually affect positive change, using nutrigenomics. And so that is certainly a really interesting application in terms of, health span, and the longevity of that health span, because it's like this, death by 1,000 cuts, right? If you kind of just ignore, all of these, minor, call it micronutrient deficiencies, for example, like a lot of chronic disease can be attributed by, essentially this thing that your body does, which is, it's like triage theory. It's like, hey, I need to beat my heart. I don't have enough calcium, so it's not in the diet. So I'm going to borrow from the bones, right? And so, now I've got an osteoarthritis or osteoporosis issue. So to even start to look at, each individual system having its like unique gasoline requirements, but now to actually even be able to affect that, right? Like in our household, we've developed like precision nutrient blends based on each of our unique DNA profiles. And to your point, when I start to get low or an ingredient is, in limiting supply, I remember actually this was like 3 months ago. I was like, wow, why am I always sore? Like I'm not even working out as much as I normally am. And then I went over to the cupboard. I noticed we didn't have any MSM. My wife normally, she's a holistic nutritionist, so she keeps all that stocked up. And anyway, I texted her. I was like, "Hey, we've been out of MSM." She's like, "Yeah, about a month." And I was like, "Wow, that's about as long as I've been feeling like heck." So this actually works, and it is like, to your point, the performance here is. I'm not after a gold medal anymore, but I am interested in being an awesome dad, right? So how do you shore up with these little changes to meet that end? And the nice thing, like with me Biosciences, for example, is this is becoming democratized. This is becoming available to the masses. So walk me through me Biosciences. You started in 2020, I think, or 2019, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What was it? What's the vision for that for me Bioscience?
Well, I'll tell you a little personal story. So Black Lab, now you've kind of got the sense of that, right? We're this venture studio incubator. We're looking for really hard problems. And usually those problems come from personal experiences, of course.
Sure. Yeah.
For me personally, what happened was I found this bump on my hip. And like any maybe dude, I tried to pop it in the shower. And my wife's like, dude, just get it cut out. It's gross. So I went to the doctor and he said, go to the dermatologist. Went to the dermatologist. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. He cut it out. He's like, oh, don't worry about it. You're fine. It's just a, sweat gland tumor of some kind or a cyst of some kind. Called me back 7 days later. And this was like December 23rd. And it took me like 2 months to even get in to see him. He's like, hey, you need to come back in. I'm like, oh, sure. You want to schedule after the new year? He's like, no, like today, right now. I'm like,
wow,
what's going on? He's like, well, that ended up being a hydroadenocarcinoma tumor and we don't have clear margins. I had no idea what any of that even meant. It basically means it's a super rare cancer. Most the 80% of the people who get it within 3 years die because people think it's a pimple. And usually it comes on the back of the neck or something. And then it metastasizes. So if I let this thing go, I wouldn't be having this conversation, right?
Wow.
But it stemmed me down, this is the thing that, you said before, like that was the trigger for me, the life or death piece. Like I need to know. And went down the whole oncology side of it. Of course, some of the best doctors and shoots. And the guy who was actually my Dr. Robinson, he said like, your tumor is the 14th in my lab, and I have the largest collection in the world. So it tells you how rare this specific cancer is. And so I'm like, all right, what are we going to do? He's like, well, we do chemo, we do radiation, we cut down and get some lymph nodes out and see if there's any spread. And I was like, oh, well, before we do any of that, let's just ask some simple questions. Like, why do I have cancer? He's like, oh, you probably bumped your hip when you were a kid. Like, did you play sports? I'm like, am I going to have cancer everywhere? And he's like, no, that's not the way it works. He's like, usually the body kind of can destroy those, injuries. It's like, okay, well then why now? Like, why here and why now? Like, why not anywhere else? And he said, well, we don't really know that either, except for he started showing me like how things flag and replicate and all this sort of stuff. And he's like, you're probably feeding it. So I said, great, let's stop feeding it. It's like, well, we don't know how to do that either.
Mm-hmm.
So he asked what I wanted to do, like the chemo or radiation or all of it. And I said, well, why do any of that? Like, you don't know anything about this cancer. So I actually went down a really personal journey to learn about myself. And back then, really all I could do was, 23andMe, and I did all my blood work, and I was in my stool and did everything I could, my biome, everything I could. And what I found out was, now it makes a ton of sense, a couple of things. I have I have genes that express as insulin resistance to simple carbs. So don't have simple carbs. And when I started detecting my blood, I was just spiking with like things like bread and keeping my blood sugar super high. So that was the fuel for this cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, well, how do I do that? So the whole glycemic index came in, and learning about a whole new way to eat, which is basically just removing simple carbs. These days I wear a glucose monitor on my arm about once a quarter to once every 2 months, just to test to see if anything's changed. I kind of know my body now. I can feel it if I'm eating something that's kind of turning into sugar. But that's what I had to do. I had to like go down this exploratory path. And then, then fast forward, I was like, well, wait a minute. Everyone needs to know themselves. Like, how do we discover ourselves? Like, how best to do that? And that was the vision for me, Biosciences, which was exactly that. You could be the most elite athlete. You could be the astronaut or want to be astronaut. You could want to, go to the UFC, or you could want to be a dad or a mom or a student. Personal story on the other side. Of course, I had my whole family do it. My son ended up being MTHFR as well. And the studies I looked at was that, especially in the military type of environment, that turns into chronic fatigue syndrome, where by 30 years old, these young men are having heart issues and stress and sleep and all the things you mentioned before. And this was a young athlete. At the time, he's like 10 years old, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this poor kid? I just found out this horrible thing. But as you know, all you need to do is take premethylated vitamins to solve this issue. And so here he is. I mean, the win there is that he's a junior at Penn, playing starting quarterback there, because we were able to look at this information early, know, and be able to basically prevent any of those issues. So that was the mission around me, Biosciences. Like, what if I could get you to know you? And then all the other, like the world tells us to be average, right? I don't care what you look at. Talk to Dave Asbury, talk to everybody. They all know exactly what everyone needs to do. It's all the same thing. Dave Asbury, I was eating his bulletproof coffee, right?
Bulletproof coffee, yeah.
And I was like, this stuff's awesome, right? Well, after I do my genetics, I'm an APO34. And what that means is that saturated fat, including MCT oil, can cause a higher rate of Alzheimer's. So why on earth would I do that sort of fat versus I can have olive oil and avocado oil and all these things that are really good for me? And so it's not about listening to like the loudest voice out there, influencer voice. It's about learning about your own voice. Like, what's the science of you? So me, Biosciences is all about saying, hey, let's learn about the science of you.
It's amazing. And so you've got some, pretty exciting partnerships lined up. What's it been like, taking this out into the wild? What's the reception been like with your different partners?
Yeah, it is interesting. There's some folks that we're still running into some folks that just don't want to know, which is, fascinating to me. I would say that the people that are on the high end of performance, that are in very stressful environments that need to perform, places like the DoD, Air Force, Space Force, places like hospitals, surgeons that are doing 9 hip surgeries in a day, they have this compound effect of stress after stress after stress after stress. And if you're not taking care of the things during those times, that's why there's so much burnout, right? People are, unfortunately, either quitting or even the suicide rates of these professions are very, very high. And I truly believe that they're preventable if we can get into the science of use. And so that's really where I think the opportunity is start at that kind of like high stress, high performance environment, prove out, especially in the medical field, if we can prove out that these doctors, surgeons, and nurses and staff are performing that much better, why wouldn't that kind of shift the whole healthcare on its head a little bit and wake up to like this personalized medicine?
So what's the full suite of analysis that you do with Me Bioscience? So there's DNA, there's bloods. Is there like a digital tracking component? I mean, to what extent are you measuring the different biomarkers?
So at the end of the day, what we want to give somebody is none of those reports. What we want to give somebody is their personalized well-being advisor in their pocket. So what we've developed is basically your personalized GPT. So imagine, you're logging on to ChatGPT or any of the other ones. And in this case, it knows everything about you. It has all your genetic information, and it has all the discovery information or the interpretation of those genetics. It has your latest blood work. If you wear an Oura Ring or an Apple Watch or a Garmin, it has all that information. And it's basically trying to be proactively interested in what you're doing. It asks about your goals. It asks about, your activities, your habits, your lifestyle, what you're looking to get out of it, what your motivations are. And what we found is that this kind of full-time advisor doesn't replace your primary care doctor, but your primary care doctor doesn't do any of that. If I call my primary care doctor and says, hey, I have an APOE3/4 status, what should I do? He wouldn't even know what to say, right? But what it does do is it takes the science that we know today and then interprets it for you personally and can guide you through it. And then we can stack different types of things on. So if you happen to be a MMA fighter or just an MMA, like that's what your exercise is, you like to do mixed martial arts, whether that's Brazilian jiu-jitsu or whatever, we can then take that and add that onto your advisor. So now all of a sudden it's interpreting that information on top of your personal information. So that's what we do. But to get there, yes, we do a full genome sequence. We do very detailed blood analysis and urine analysis. We've got a couple of surveys that you fill out, really more kind of, we are definitely big in kind of mind, body, heart, relationship, vocation, environmental factors. And so we want to learn about those things because we believe that everything is all tied together.
It was interesting when I developed the first iteration of the athlete DNA, performance DNA results. I was so excited because I was like, oh, if I had all this information when I was competing as a track and field athlete, I was a boxer first, but I switched over to track and field. One, I was looking for something that gave me to do some physical activity that was socially accepted to spend, between 10 and 20 hours a week. That's how I think. And, I like the competition and I like kind of the challenge of precision, right? And the challenge of, figuring out the puzzle of human performance. And, of course, like the tools that I had back then had a great coach, but there was also a lot of trial and error. And, there were a lot of mistakes that I made, certainly when my coach wasn't watching, that probably could have been avoided, by adjusting for things like, training load or kinds of exercises that I was doing. Like I didn't need to have the hamstring tears that I had, or I didn't need to have the labral tears that I had. And, I could have avoided multiple surgeries had I had this information up front. Now, who knows would I have listened, right? Because I'm still, young and invincible back then. So maybe I wouldn't have, but I thought, oh my gosh, like athletes are going to love this, right? Because I'm going to show them how to avoid injury. I'm going to show them about their, minimum effective training dose so that they can, optimize how they spend their time. And I'm going to show them how to optimize their recovery. And the thing I made the mistake on over indexing on was like just how cool the tech was. Because what the athletes wanted was like exactly what you're describing right now. They're like, just tell me the answer based on me. Right now, the way we did that, the way we got around that at the time was we actually went through the coach because there was a lot of, high touch with Olympic athletes. So, but that meant, educating the coaches on genetics. And they're like, hey man, I don't have time to get a PhD in genetics. The Olympics are coming next year. Like, so there really was, so on the back of this insight and all this information, there was like, okay, but like, give me the heuristic, right? Give me the simple thing to do and don't make my job more difficult. So it's really interesting now to, fast forward, 10 years, because, we had done this, before wearables were a thing. We'd actually, built this application to, serve your genetics in the context of your, self-reporting to the workouts, right? Now we have wearable tech. But the coach would get the recommendation in their hands. So we did build a technical solution around it. But each organization was different, and they had specific requests for athlete management systems and platforms. And the nice thing about which you've got now, it sounds like, with leveraging the GPTs, is like, well, hey, this is a universal system that anybody can do, because now you're literally having a conversation. Like, it sounds like you've created, like, the personal Jarvis for everyone. It's like Iron Man's like personal Jarvis. Like, that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I mean, our vision is like, how do we democratize this? You talked about 1 billion people. What if I could get all the people under 25 in Nigeria to know about themselves? And what if it was free? And then maybe it costs a little money to get like a DNA test, because you got to go to a lab. But then I just upload that stuff. And what if the blood? Okay, I got to pay a little money to the blood work, do that, and now all of a sudden that knows knows me. Maybe I start just typing what I'm doing. But it knows me, it's learning about me. And over time, the more and more you feed it, the more and more prescriptive and personalized it can get. And so that's the idea, right? Like democratizing truly healthcare. I'm not saying that we're going to, that's not taking out the big diseases. That's not taking out solving for cancer. That's not doing any of that. It's just saying, how do we help these? I mean, look at our obesity problem in the US. It's driven by our food and our pharma business, right? And our healthcare. So those three systems have created this environment. If we can get back to the idea of personalized, that's kind of where I see the possibilities. And especially with AI coming, and we can talk about this too, but in 5 years, I can't imagine where AI isn't smarter than all humans combined. We call that the singularity, which is at that point, what is going to be our purpose on this planet? What are we going to do with our lives? And I think it's really going to be about living fully in all those different areas of well-being.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about me, Biosciences. What about, Black Lab X? Like, tell me about that. Tell me about Boulder, Colorado, because you've got like performance labs, you've got like an incubator. Yeah. What's it like walking through that setup?
Well, you're invited anytime. Boulder's in itself is 10 square miles surrounded by reality. And it's great. So we get to, obviously have the whole outdoors and the mountains and all the beautiful things that come with it. I think environmental health is a key component, and definitely helped us get through COVID and those things. Black Lab, it was designed to be just that, a vehicle, a place, physical place where people can come together. And I call these people the thinker-doers. They're people who want to think hard about problems and then actually go and solve them. And it can come in lots of different forms, artists and athletes and technologists, investors, like you said. But how do we build a place to actually attract and give people permission to start the conversation with purpose? I'd never been in an environment like that. And nobody ever taught me that in school, right? It was like, hey, learn this skill so you can get this job, so you can make this money, you can live in this box. And I was trying to flip the conversation much more towards like a Leonardo da Vinci, the way he thinks, or an Elon Musk, or Steve Jobs, or I was trying to flip it so that we could have a very different type of orientation around what work looked like. And so you come in, there's a co-working high-tech space. There's, tables and offices and conference rooms. And the idea is a place to gather, future of work. There's this massive human performance lab, which is cleated turf and all sorts of equipment in there, a lot of technology. It's actually doubles as our gym. So we've got about 200 members in there. Some great Olympians working out of there. And so very inspirational, but also 12-year-old kids playing lacrosse and, people like me trying to stay in shape. And then we've got a wellness center that's acupuncture and massage and dry needling and PT and all those different modalities, cold plunge, sauna. So we're really trying to, again, help the body to do the best it can based on the science. Like, how do we help the body do its best? And we've got art studios in here. We might have mentioned that earlier. Will Day is our resident artist right now. This is one of his pieces. So it's different to have like creativity actually built or done in here versus just hanging paintings. And so we wanted to make sure that creativeness and people who, especially artists, musicians and artists, are they have a different way of approaching creativity and like this idea of turning thoughts into reality. Like, how do you birth a brand new thing? And that's what we wanted to kind of have in here. So we have a media lab for photography, videography, and out the back we have a 3PL. So it's literally, we can ship to, and we do ship to thousands of retailers every week. So you come in, we have a summit, you meet a bunch of cool people, you find purpose, you kind of link rafts together, you start to work on stuff, you get workouts because we have to stay in shape and obviously build some relationships. We prototype it, we test it in the lab. Ultimately, we can ship it out the back door. So it's an idea of a platform
Crazy
to be able to launch these companies.
Amazing. So how many, let's call them, creators, you got athletes, artists, got entrepreneurs, investors. How many residents do you have at any one moment?
Yeah, any week we probably have, we've got a couple hundred, like I said, gym members who are kind of a combination.
Right.
A lot of these folks are in the Boulder ecosystem, very entrepreneurial. Most of them are innovators of some sort. We just had our 10-year anniversary. A few hundred people came in for that event.
Wow.
And so it's, in and out, we have a couple 300 in a week. I kind of feel like we're probably at that 3,000 level as far as people who engage over the year. But our goal is to grow that into the, tens and hundreds of thousands. And that I think becomes the tipping point where we have, again, none of these people are coming in saying, they work for Black Lab. They're saying, hey, I'm part of this community. And together we're building these companies and launching these technologies that are making impact.
Amazing. I having, been an entrepreneur, having, still am an entrepreneur. I one of the things that I noticed was that it can be a lonely journey, right? Like you're definitely off the beat path. And that's, frankly, that's one of the things I really like. I mean, part of the reason I think I did graduate school and did my PhD versus, medical school was just the ability to think freely, think outside the box. I had a really great, next level thinker, philosopher as a PhD supervisor. I mean, he's the guy actually who, same as before, Doolittle, he deconstructed Darwin's tree of life by integrating things like, lateral gene transfer between species. And yeah, just really would blow your mind. And he actually won the Canadian Herzberg medal, which is like the, I guess our version of the Nobel. It's like $1 million when you're professor emeritus, go on, do whatever you want just because we trust you. And, it was funny. I remember he gave me permission to think. I remember I was literally sitting at my desk one time and I was just kind of spacing out, like just kind of thinking. And he caught me and I was like, maybe it doesn't look like I'm working. And he's like, you know what? You were just doing the best kind of work. And when I was at Stanford doing my PhD, what I used to do is I'd have these tubes of these tryptophan assays that he was doing as part of like some bacteriology study. And he would always have them at the ready because he said he would be sitting at his desk just doing absolutely nothing, like just thinking. But he always had to have the illusion that he was doing some work, right? So there's this, one of the things that you pointed at was this notion of purpose and finding purpose. And it's like, well, what does it look like when you're finding purpose? Like, kind of looks like you're wasting time, right? And so, I think there's a lot of, that's what makes the journey, lonesome at times, makes it hard. There's highs and lows of being an entrepreneur. And just having experienced that myself, I make a point to like just do a lot of coaching, with entrepreneurs, a lot of mindset stuff, helping them build a personal constitution so that they have a way to, kind of realign and assess whether things are, meaningful in terms of a specific decision-making criteria that again aligns with their principles and values. I, do a pillar of their biology. So similar to you, like their DNA, their bloods, et cetera. Like here's aspects of your biology that are now in your control. And here's aspects of your philosophy that you're intentional about, and you're changing your worldview all the time based on your learning. And then here's your execution plan borrowed from Olympians, right? Like here's how we periodize and we build and we measure towards progress. But, we also allow for, creativity in the unknown. So just wondering in terms of, all these folks that come and work out of, Black Lab X, like, are these all users of Meet Bioscience? Do you guys offer like coaching and support, like to like the human side of the businesses, of the startups that you guys, nurture and foster?
Yeah, we've got a great set of coaches here, but we also
Amazing.
partner with anyone who comes in, right? We've got so many people who come in and they're already doing life coaching or some kind of business coaching, and they just join our community, right? And they don't have to be under our title to not be part of the community and tie raft together to do it. So I think what we're learning is that, and I'll just give you another example. I call myself still new to it, but I've been meditating for about 10 years now. And when I first went into that exercise, I was trying to get some productivity hack, right? I had heard that people can be more creative or do more work or be more productive. And of course, what I learned was, for those who know the joke, is that it's a completely different thing, right? Meditation is about understanding awareness and consciousness. And it's a really freeing piece. Whereas, and so like, not everybody who comes in knows that. And so this is like a discovery place too. It's about just, it's like taking off the layers of the onion. And I'm constantly doing it too. I'm like, oh my gosh, I never knew, like last year, I had no idea about that. Somebody told me something really interesting. I think it was, I can't remember who it was now, but it was kind of like Richard Feynman. I don't know if you remember, Feynman was a scientist did a bunch of amazing article or lectures out of Cal. And when I look back at him, he had like the most, he would have a room packed full of everything from first year students to the top professors. When he gave a lecture, nobody left either feeling like they talked over his head or down to them. He was able to articulate a conversation and a story so well that everybody walked out like blown away. And so I was trying to explore that. I was like, how do you do that? How do you really do that? And someone made a really interesting point, which was, listen, there's these tiers of, I know what it was Ken Wilber. I don't know if you know who Ken Wilber is, big consciousness person, but he said there's these levels of consciousness. Let's just say that there's 10 for easy math. And let's say that you're at a 5 and I'm at a 3. I can describe my worldview to you and you will totally understand it. But if you try to explain your worldview to me, I think you're insane. It's like the fish that's underwater. It's like swimming around, pops his head out of the water. And it's like, oh my gosh, there's like flying birds, or they don't call them birds, right? There's flying fish up there. And he comes back and tries to tell his friends that. And they're like, you're crazy. So I think that what's happening is that what we want to build is this community where people are always up leveling, never talking down, because that's kind of where we are. It's just where we are on our journey. But how do we keep on up leveling and unleashing greatness, right? To me, that's the journey that I really want to be on.
Yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, it's funny. I finished one of Ken Wilber's books recently. The more recent one, I think it's on spiral dynamics in terms of exactly what you were talking about in terms of consciousness. And he explains these different, archetypes. Like I think it's your beige is your most primal, and I think turquoise is like your kind of transcendent. And the fact is, we're all born beige, right? Because let's say you're born into sin, you're born an animal instincts, right? And then again, it is that kind of, again, latent potential in us. And I'm so glad you brought up that notion of storytelling, because like stories are just like language, right? The ultimate technology. Like it's so powerful that you can read a story and get the moral of the story and not repeat the mistakes of the hero or the villain, et cetera. Right. So you can kind of, iterate your actions, so to speak, through these stories. And it sounds like you're building the kind of a community around that as well, like specifically in innovation and in entrepreneurship with it, which is just sounds absolutely incredible. In terms of, who you've got at the lab right now, what's an example of, one project you're, particularly excited about, for the future? Could be one of yours. I know we talked about, SpaceX at the outset of the call, but could be, any of your resident entrepreneurs. What's got hold of your imagination today?
I'll give an example of some AI technology that we're building with the DoD. But again, let me relate it back to like the digital transformation that the internet did. You can imagine in 95, there were a lot of companies that says, a website, what's that? I don't need that, right? And then those companies aren't around anymore. We're at the same spot with AI, right? Which is, there's going to be the first companies that, leverage AI, but pretty soon we're going to have AI native companies. And so that's really where our focus shift is how does every new company we build be 100% AI native? Meaning you're basically doing no work except for the primary value you're creating. Everything else is outsourced. Whether that's to an agent itself, an AI agent, or to another company, but only focus on the work that creates the most value. So that's kind of what we think about AI native and exponential technologies. So the problem set was this, which was, hey, understanding difficult environments, very stressful, difficult environments, and translating how to operate optimally in those environments is very difficult. And language is the ultimate technology, but what do? Do I tell you what to do? Do I write it in a book and you read it? Do I put a video together and you watch it? Right. And that's kind of, again, going back to learning productions, we built this learning simulator. So in that same area, one of the problems was that, we were sending a lot of folks to extreme cold currently, like up in, Arctic areas. And these warfighters don't know what to do up there. They're coming from, Texas or Florida, and probably have never even been to, Vail or Colorado, unless operate in minus 50, minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Like, I don't even want to be in minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And to operate in that environment, there's extreme parameters. Like, if you have your hands exposed for more than, I think, a couple minutes, you have frostbite and you are now a liability. You have to mediate back out. And so what we wanted to do is take all this really rich and dense information, build a ground truth to say, actually, this is the correct information, not all this other information. And then basically populate the capability of an AI system to be able to be in the pocket to that human for all those different areas, whether it's what you wear, whether it's how you operate, how to operate a snowmobile, if you're going through water, if you get exposed to water, if you break your leg and you have to be, all the different scenarios. And so that's the sort of stuff I think we get really excited about right now. It's like really interesting domains, very hard, situational, environments, and then ultimately helping people do things that they've never been able to do.
The way you described startups or the future of startups it reminds me of, actually, you probably heard of the futurist Kevin Kelly. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what he said a decade ago. Is like the future of, innovation and startups is going to be, teams of entrepreneurs with great ideas plus AI, right? And so yeah, effectively everything becomes, outsourced except I don't know, what would you say, even the ideation can be outsourced, but the critical thinking, the aha moment, right? The brainstorm, when two minds gather, a third consciousness is created, kind of thing. So it's funny, I was having actually a conversation about this just yesterday with a colleague of mine, where we were talking about how, Coca-Cola has, released its holiday video, which is like purely AI, generative AI. And in the I guess the AI geeks are like, wow, what an amazing feat. But then the artists are like, oh my God, art's dead. And, everything is out the window. But, we kind of like push that conversation to its edge, where it's like to a certain extent, well, there's like a lot of, YouTube videos that are out today that are already AI. And depending on where you're at in terms of your subject matter expertise on that topic, it actually will have some utility. If you're, kind of new, if you're more advanced, you're going to be like, no, okay, this is AI. I want an authentic experience, right? But there does seem to be this kind of, ratcheting up of like human creativity that a machine can't do. So it's like, it kind of forces humanity to think, what can I do that a machine can't do? Right. And what am I freed up from that if a machine could do, why would I do it anyway? Right. So that is a really interesting, conundrum that frankly comes back to that very problem of, meaning and purpose. Right. And so, I mean, it sounds to me, I mean, to come full circle, like now I've kind of had my aha moment. It's like, that's really what Black Lab X does, doesn't it? It provides that space for you to find meaning and purpose. I think you've been saying this all along, but I think I finally just got it. So yeah. So
It's layers to the onion. It's like
yeah.
when people hear unleash greatness, they're like, oh, you're going to help me get, lose 10 pounds. Right. But it's just, it's okay. Because it's layers of the onion.
That's one part for sure. Physical domain or dimension is definitely a part of it. JP, one of the things I mentioned at the outset of the call is I was going to ask you 3 questions at the end. What's the key message that we want to get out if this was our last podcast? Who needs to hear it? And the third thing was, who would you recommend to have on the DNA of things?
All right, you're gonna have to remind me of those questions here, but I'll start with the first one, which is, this is my last podcast.
Yeah.
So I told you that I've been exploring this consciousness and meditation thing, and one of the things that I just want the world to know, and this is, by the way, it's not me making it up. It's been written and said for thousands and thousands of years. We are living on this rock spinning through space, and the probability that me, JP, is alive with this DNA set is 0. There's no chance of it. So it's so improbable. Like, you just need to accept that it's almost impossible. So then what do you do with it? Do you just go F off, or do you do something like, do you go all out? Do you go full send? And I think that's my answer, is like, go full send. Because it's so impossible, you got this gift, just go full send and really find your purpose and go fully at it. But then the paradox is this: the third leg of the stool is then you have to totally surrender to whatever shows up, right? You can't get so in your britches that like you freak out that this company didn't succeed, or I didn't solve this one thing, or this marriage didn't work, or whatever. Like, you have to actually go all out, know your purpose, go all out, and then ultimately surrender to what it is. Why? Because we're living on this rock spinning through space that's totally improbable. So anyway, that's the one thing I would say. Like, if I died tomorrow, I want everyone to know that's my perspective.
Yeah. So, I mean, the next question was, well, who needs to hear that? But it kind of sounds like that's something for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
beautiful.
I think for me right now is like, I think that the people that I want to really hear it are those that are looking for it. They know there's more. And they come from an athletic or a technology or an artist background, or, and a lot of the people I'm meeting today are actually family offices and funders. They're like, listen, I'm so tired of investing the normal way. Like, what can we put this resource to real use? So that's really the people who are searching right now, those are the people I want to hear.
Amazing. Yeah. And then the third question was, who would you nominate to be on the DNA of Things?
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, I'm going to do two. One is somebody you and Ashley, the current chairman of the medical department at Stanford. Ewan is doing amazing work in genetics and genomics and omics in general. And he's just leading some of the most interesting minds right now. And I think that understanding exactly the taste of what they're at could be really interesting. But the other person is Christian Angemeyer. You know Christian?
I don't know that I do. No.
He's lives in London, German from birth. He runs Aperion, and he's kind of like the Peter Thiel of Europe. Really, he's got Juveron as a company, Atai Life Sciences. So he's both in like the longevity side of pharma and kind of science. I would say pharma, but like biosciences, including, and then also on the other side of that, he's into the science of psychedelics and mental health. And he's doing amazing investments in launching incredible companies over there. I think he's got a really unique, I had him on one of my podcasts a few years ago, and he's got a really just unique way of looking at the world that I think you would enjoy having that conversation with.
Amazing. So does he work with Dr. Daniel Stickler?
Not that I know of. No.
I thought you mentioned Aperion. I thought maybe it's same name, different company.
Yeah, and I could be mixing the name, but it's close to that. Look it up.
Okay.
Christian Angemeyer, and we'll figure it out.
Christian Angemeyer. Yeah, no, I'll definitely find him. Well, JP, absolute pleasure, having you on the show today, getting to speak with you, getting a kind of a glimpse into your mind and everything that you've got going on with, me Biosciences and Black Lab X. I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
It was fun. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the DNA of Things with JP O'Brien. From his personal story of overcoming cancer to his pioneering work in genomics and AI, JP reminds us of the power of purpose, resilience, and innovation. His call to go full in, all in, full send in life, paired with the humility to surrender to its unfolding, challenges us to live fully and meaningfully. As we look to the future, JP's work at Black Lab X and Me Biosciences highlights the incredible potential within each of us when science, creativity, and purpose align. Whether you're an entrepreneur, an athlete, or simply curious about unlocking your own potential, today's conversation offers tools and inspiration to take that next step. So if this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's amplify these ideas and create a ripple effect of positive change. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on the DNA of Things.